welcome along. I see we've got a few people. We've got David and Brad and Jenny. And I'm not sure how to say that one. Lanvelis, maybe. Well, um, welcome along. We're glad to have everybody along with us today. My name is Flyboy12. If you've ever been around our Lake Hood stream, you've seen me there. If not, my name is Garrett. Outside of that, and I'm joined here today with Kevin. Kevin is a pilot and fellow aviation nerd. He lives here actually near me. Yeah, Kevin, tell us a little bit about who you are and what your experience is and background, maybe as much as you want to, in the aviation industry.
Sure. I was an airline pilot for 34 years. I flew for United Parcel Service. Previous to that, I was general aviation. I flew primarily MU-2s, a Mitsubishi MU-2. Those there maybe aviation nerds as well would know what that is. Had some King Air time, a little bit of Lear time prior to getting hired by UPS in 1989. I was an engineer for 10 months. I flew right seat in a DC-8 for 5 years. And I made captain in 1995 on the 7.5 program. 2 years later, they brought on the 7.6, which, for those of you that know, that's an aircraft with one type rating. You can fly both jets, which is not normal. Usually in the airline business, it's one jet, one pilot. You don't get to fly, doesn't matter what your type ratings are, you can only fly one at a time. And the 7.5, 7.6 program is unique. Boeing designed them to be so similar. The FAA allows you to fly either the 7.5 or the 7.6 on any given day. I did that for 25 years on those jets. And then my final 3 years, I flew the 747-8, which, again, for those of you that are aware, that was the final iteration of the 747, latest and greatest, brand new, a privilege to fly. And I got about 1,000 hours on that. And then at age 65, 2 years ago, I had to leave. And now I fly a mid-sized jet or a super mid-sized jet called the Citation Sovereign. I do that for a small company here in Louisville, Kentucky. So still get to do my thing. I love flying. It's a privilege to fly. I happen to have a career that's also other people's hobbies. Who does that? Unless you're a golfer, whose career is also their hobby. So, any case, it brings me to today.
That's so cool. So, have you ever flown in or near the Midway Airport?
So used to go to O'Hare all the time.
Okay.
As a private pilot, you look at places like when you look at taxi charts, when you first become an instrument pilot, you've got all these charts and you see this O'Hare chart or a JFK chart or LAX chart. You're like, oh my gosh, they just scare the heck out of you. Looking at it, the possibility of what you could do wrong. So when I made co-pilot on the DC-8 at UPS back in 1990, I started flying Chicago, Louisville, Chicago. That's all I did. It's an hour and 10 minutes each way. And I did that in the middle of the night. I loved it. It was great. And I got to learn O'Hare. And I knew O'Hare like the back of my hand. With that said, over the last 30 years, they've changed it a lot. They do a lot of construction at O'Hare. So I'd fly O'Hare. So I didn't go to Midway. Okay. With that said, now that I'm retired and I fly the Citation Sovereign, I've been to Midway at least 2 or 3 or 4 times. Okay. The challenge with Midway is that it, like many airports around the nation, it mixes the airliners with the small guys.
Yeah.
Now, every small jet can keep up with an airliner. That's not the issue. In fact, turboprops below 10,000 feet can keep up with an airliner. For those that don't know, the speed limit is 250 knots indicated below 10,000. Yeah. So a lot of people can do 250. So that's not the problem. It's mixing the smaller aircraft with the airlines and where they're going, and it just makes it more complicated. It's a challenge for the controllers, challenge for the pilots.
Now, are you describing it's a challenge in the air or on the ground or both?
So in the air, for those that know, wake turbulence. And you see it in a ship, right? When a ship's going through water, the big ships put out a big wake.
Yeah.
And if you're a small dinghy, you do not want to be behind that big ship. So the larger and heavier an aircraft is, the bigger that invisible wake that it's creating. Okay, that's bigger. It's bigger. It's heavier.
Yeah.
So especially heavy jets. Heavy jet is anything over 250,000 pounds. So
that's helpful.
But a 737 weighs anywhere from, 150 to maybe 180 these days. They make some pretty big 737s now. If you're on a small aircraft coming in behind that guy, he can hurt you.
Yeah.
He can hurt you.
Very quickly, too.
So, yeah. So wakes fall. They fall at 500 feet a minute behind the aircraft as it's flying. So if a bigger jet, if I'm coming in on final approach and a bigger jet had just come in front of me and he came in over the top of the glide slope, that vertical path everybody wants to fly, okay? If he came in a little high, no big deal. But if he came in a little high, his weight could, if I'm coming in at the normal point, it could fall on top of me. It could hurt me. So I need to pay attention to this, okay? Yep. Controllers need to pay attention to how close they're bringing in the smaller aircraft. And they do. Everybody does a good job. But that would be a complexity issue.
Yeah. Okay.
The 7.3 behind a 7.3, he's not thinking about it.
Right. It's falling fast enough that it's not a factor for the 7.3.
And the weight.
A similar
the weight and size is okay. The weight, again, you can handle the wake of the guy in front of you. I'm not saying it wouldn't feel bumpy. I'm not saying you wouldn't feel it. I'm just saying it wouldn't turn you upside down, which frankly, the wake of a 7.3 could turn a 172 upside down.
Yeah.
Kill everybody on board. You have to be careful of those types of things. But all pilots are taught about wake turbulence. It's a basic common thing. You're a pilot. You were taught that. And we all deal with it. But that would be a complexity issue at a Midway. That may be going into O'Hare, 7.3, 7.3, 7.5, 7.3. It isn't the same thing.
Right.
And there are spacing parameters, right? If you've got a 7.4 coming in, the controller knows to space the guy behind. I don't care who he is. You're going to want to be a little further back.
Right.
They're watching these things. So this is all part of what professional aviation is about. It's part of what aviation is about, but hopefully the professional takes it to a higher level.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the training that pilots go through, and not even in relation to this, though I think what I'm about to say applies directly to what we're talking about here today. But I've been reflecting on my training. I have gone through and gotten my private pilot. It's been a few years since I've flown, but that's the stage that I've achieved to this point. And I feel like if you could boil down all of the training, the hours and hours and hours of training that I did both on the ground and in the air, the training really could be summarized by safety. How do you maneuver the plane safely? How do you land the plane safely? How do you take it off? How do you do an emergency landing safely? It's all about understanding, and we talked about this earlier, where you are and what's around you. Situational awareness is what, that's the term you used, or SA for short. And we'll come back to that, I think, in a lot more detail in a moment. But it really seems like the training comes down to that. There's a lot of other things alongside of that are vital and necessary, and you need to know, especially as you advance to, say, instrument or commercial ratings, or even on from there. Like, there's more technicalities and things that you're obviously going to learn and need to learn. But a really core principle, it feels like to me, and I would love to hear your thoughts, is just safety. How do you interact safely as a pilot with other people, other pilots, other aircraft, people on the ground, so on, in a safe and responsible manner?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. The challenge is the number one reason somebody goes to their local airport and says, I want to take a flying lesson. It's not because they go, you know what? I just want to be safe.
Yeah.
Like I want to have a good time. I want to have fun. I want to fly an airplane.
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. And that's the goal, right? To go have fun.
Yeah.
It's not like, I need to be safer in my life. I think I want to take flying lessons so I can practice safety. So that's a challenge. What kind of person are you? What's your personality?
Yeah.
Most instructors are because they're doing what they're doing, are going to teach you that safety stuff. And you're going to learn that. But what's your personality?
Yeah.
Are you there just for the fun? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's why I got into aviation. I thought it was fun. Wow, this is cool. You're going down a runway in a 152, 50 miles an hour, which is slower than maybe how fast you go down a boulevard in your own town, and all of a sudden the guy you're flying with, you're just taking your first familiarization ride. The guy next to you pulls back on this wheel, this control wheel in front of him. All of a sudden you're going up and up, and it's like this real gentle, experience. I don't know. The whole thing is cool. And then to just do it again, it's fun. Let's face it, aviation's fun.
Yeah.
But to do it right, like you said, safety's the key.
Yeah.
And safety starts with your pre-flight, right? Just pre-flighting the airplane.
Yeah.
Pre-flighting your flight, the weather. If you're newer, you got a couple hundred hours, you got 50 hours. What are the things maybe you're not good at yet? What are things you think you should avoid? Like most instructors and most FAA people will tell you, if you're a brand new instrument pilot, please don't go to minimums. Practice. You just got a rating. It doesn't mean you're perfect at it. It doesn't mean you're going to be an expert and perfect each time. Be careful.
Yeah.
Practice with buffers. Get better, get better, get better. And that's time consuming. It's also financially consuming.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so, but safety. Yeah. And the further you go, the more complex things are. The aircraft is more complex. Yeah. What you're doing is more complex, from whether it's taxiing and the checklists that are still being done, flying out, your departure, your cruise, your arrival, all these things, way more complex. So we build on that, right? We build on our experience. Pick anything you do, whether brain surgeon, didn't start off doing brain surgery. Okay, everybody starts off in the basics and builds on that. Modular building. Hopefully, it's intelligent instruction and it's built to build on itself.
Yeah.
But safety's the key. And what happened the other day, yesterday, these are little things. So I'll be honest with you. I still, in my career, ran across people who, when it came to a taxi diagram, no, just tell me when Yankee's coming up and we'll make a left on Yankee. Meaning that guy didn't even look at it.
Yeah, he doesn't know where he's headed.
No. And I get that. I came from general aviation, where things like studying a taxi chart just wasn't even in the mix. Most likely because a guy was always flying into a small one-strip airport and had one taxiway. Yeah. I get it. Okay. But, you're getting into further and further, and you get into jets. So are you going to take your I fly 172s attitude into the higher, more complex, high-performance aircraft and aircraft environment? Are you going to take that attitude in with you? Because I still, every so often, run into guys that they didn't want to
quite let go, huh?
Yeah. And actually knowingly conflict with what, say, airline pilots do. Now, if you're going to say to yourself, I'm not doing that, I don't need to do that, that's for those guys. Like, are you saying it's for the airline pilots because they're not as good as you? Is that what you're saying? That they practice habits you don't need to practice because you're better than them, or they're just not as good as you? Well, what's your rationale for ignoring an entire industry of pilots and say, well, I don't need to do that.
Right.
I'm smarter than that. And sadly, every so often you come across guys that are out there. And fortunately, in my world, in the airline world, really rare. I'm not saying it happens a lot in general aviation, but it might happen a little more. And I think it's because you don't get exposed. I got exposed to hundreds and hundreds of pilots in 34 years. Guys were really accurate.
Yeah.
6 years at UPS. UPS was hiring former airline captains from international airlines around the world, whether it was Etihad or Emirates or JAL. We were flying 747s and A380s around the world, 7, and they became my co-pilot. Why'd they come to UPS? I believe it was because we're more stable and certainly more financially advantageous than some of the other airlines. And they came in their 40s and 50s, came to UPS, and they were my co-pilots. It's like, wow, what an opportunity! Not that a 35-year-old co-pilot can't teach me something. Everybody can teach me something. But wow, these guys some were instructors on these jets. They were able to show me little tricks that they've used. Maybe a better pilot my last 3 to 5 years. Always. So.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. But safety's number one. What can I do to make this smarter and safer? Here's a great example. You think you might be faced with a situation, or you are faced with a situation that's going to require a checklist or whatever. We use the term, and I would tell my co-pilots this, I'll tell you what, if we need to, I'm going to build us some time. What does that mean? I'm going to slow the jet down. I'm going to tell the controller we need vectors or turns away. Maybe go hold. I want to make sure we don't rush into whatever we're doing. We called it building time. I'm going to build some time.
Gotcha. So this is on an approach to landing or something like that. You're going to build in some time because you're not quite ready to land just yet or something like that.
Sure, maybe we're not done with the checklist. Maybe we had to run something slightly abnormal. No big deal.
Yeah.
Sometimes messages pop up and you would never know because it's a minor thing. But you'll run the checklist and go, okay, we're fine. We'll move on. Yeah. In other words, a system is telling me there's something wrong, but it's not a safety item. It's something maintenance needs to look at when I get on the ground. But it still required me to maybe look at a checklist.
Yeah.
Let's slow down a little bit here. Let's run the checklist, And again, if need be, we'll tell the controller we need to break off the approach if we were that close.
Right.
And these are decisions that you make as a captain, or you make as a crew.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have Stone, who is a frequent chatter and camera moderator at Chicago Midway. That's about to join us, so let me bring him in.
Okay.
Here he is. Welcome along, Stone.
Good afternoon, all.
Hey.
How are you?
Good.
Good. Glad to have you along.
Hat on. He's got the cool hat on, too.
I got the hat.
Yeah.
Kevin,
I've been catching a little bit of what you guys were saying here. I had another engagement taking place, so joined it as I could.
Yeah.
Very good. Glad to have you. Kevin, as we kind of dive into what specifically happened at Midway yesterday, I wanted to ask you a little bit. You were talking about pre-flights, and you just kind of mentioned that in passing a moment ago, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. For those who are watching right now, who maybe don't know what you mean by the term pre-flight, what does that mean? What's happening in the cockpit? What's happening with the pilot? What does that mean?
Well, everybody's going to do a pre-flight, whether you're in a single-engine airplane or you're in a crew-oriented aircraft. But let's just take a look at the crew-oriented airplane, right? The airliner or the small jet. You got to do an exterior pre-flight, and you got to do an interior pre-flight. And then you can even break that up into the back and the front. The back is like the airplane I fly, the Sovereign. You're going to check the seats, make sure they're secured, they're in the right spot, because these seats can rotate. They aren't like the ones that you fly in when you're flying Southwest or United. Yeah. These things rotate, recline, blah, blah, blah. So you want to make sure the seats are ready for the passengers when they get on board. Make sure the emergency exit is secure. Make sure there's no pin. When you land a small aircraft, small jet, most of them have a pin you would put in the emergency exit. Why? You want to secure it so no bad guy can get in from the outside. On the other hand, when you're flying, you don't want the pin in there, because if good guys have to get you because you did an emergency landing, you've locked that emergency exit and nobody can get in to help you. So little things like that. So you want to make sure the back end is good. And now the front end, that's the more complicated thing, right? You want to make sure all your switches are in the right spot. Make sure the circuit breakers are all pushed in. These are basic things you're checking. You're checking to make sure the oxygen bottle underneath one of the seats, make sure the needle's in the green. Does it have oxygen? Did somebody use it? Forget to tell somebody, and they put it back. That would be really weird. I can't imagine any professional doing that. But, the planes also go through maintenance. You never know who touched something. So the front end, the guy who's doing the interior on the front end, remember, all modern airplanes are computers, right? You got a navigation computer, and they also do performance for you. It'll tell you the speed you need to rotate at, pull back. Tells you speed to climb out. It tells you various things. But you want to put your flight plan in there, where you starting from, where you going to, and then the points, okay, that you've been cleared, the path you've been cleared, the lateral path. Make sure all the instruments look right. You set all of this up. So somebody's doing that. And a two-person airplane, somebody's doing the cockpit in the back. The other guy's doing the walk around. How do the tires look? The struts on the main gear and the nose gear.
Right.
Do you see any puddles anywhere? You shouldn't see any puddles anywhere. Nothing should be leaking. Nothing should be frayed. Nothing should be dangling. These are big picture things. There is a lot of vents and openings on jets. Are any of them clogged? It's not uncommon to potentially find a nest being built in, say, if you have an APU, the auxiliary power unit, that small jet engine on more sophisticated aircraft that provides electricity and heat and cooling for you on the ground. That exhaust, if the APU isn't running yet and the airplane's been sitting for a couple of days, if you didn't put a plug in that hole, there's going to be a bird nest. We've had guys
especially this time of year where
yes, oh my gosh.
Maybe not up north, but in the south, you see birds already starting to nest at this point.
Yeah, when you were flying whatever airplane you flew, you had a pitot covers for your pitot tube, right?
Yep. Because
it's not uncommon. I know a couple guys about 6 months ago, some insects were inside the pitot tube, and it didn't make a difference till they got airborne. And now their airspeed is screwed up. They have an data computer that's providing information, and it's all screwed up. I got to tell you, that messes up a lot of instruments. Their airspeed indicator, I think in this case, it messed up their altimeter. They're trying to get past all these things just because some bugs got into a pitot tube. So the exterior,
this will make a nice home.
Yeah. Exterior pre-flight. You check all the big holes in the airplane. In other words, on a small jet, you can lift up the nose, check inside. There's a lot of radio equipment, all kinds of things that are inside there. You want to make sure a bad guy didn't get in. Just from a TSA standpoint, any compartment you can get into, open it and look at it.
Yeah.
A bad guy could have put something in there. The baggage compartment. The APU compartment, where we just talked about the auxiliary power unit, there's a big compartment in the back that you can stand up and look into and look around, see, again, any leaks, any frayed wires, any dangling wires. How does it look? And make sure there's not a package of something that shouldn't be there.
Nobody, no nothing.
Yeah, so that would be the typical pre-flight. Exterior pre-flight, the overall integrity of the aircraft, interior pre-flight, integrity, and then setting up the cockpit for departure.
Gotcha. So that's happened, and now there are checklists that they're going to go through. They're going to come and sit in the front seats, and they're going to start going through checklists to actually start the aircraft, and even pre-starting the aircraft checklists. And all of that is leading towards them actually starting to move, correct?
Yes.
All that's done ahead of that.
Yes. So one of the challenges in being a professional at the levels, if you want to be the best and you want to emulate the best, checklists are part of that. Now, did we set up the cockpit? Yeah. Do most guys know how to set up the cockpit without a checklist? Yes. We call those flows. Yep. Whatever your flow is, left to right, up, down, whatever your flow is, you're going to do your flows to make sure everything is set. Notice the word checklist. What's the first word? Check, not do. Yep. It's not a do list. The assumption is you've done it. Why do we check it? because we're human beings, we may have made a mistake, and it helps get us both on the team thing, the challenge response. One guy reads it, one guy responds to it. It brings the team together. Are we both on the same page? Did we do something wrong? So there's in the plane I'm on now, we call it the cockpit prep checklist. So, all right, standby power switch, tested, on. Emergency light switch, armed. You're going to start going through these things. The challenge is, as you get really good later on and you're extremely familiar with the aircraft, what's a natural tendency for people to want to do?
We got that.
Thank you. Geez, I got 1,000 hours doing this. I just did 3 legs today. I did the checklist. We're not going to do it this time.
It'll be fine.
That's the challenge, to be disciplined each time. You do it each time. I had this discussion with the guy I was flying with. They said, I had just in the 7576 program, around 11,000 hours as a captain on that airplane. On my last leg, before I went into 747 school, my last leg, just for instance, the before start checklist. Do you think I called for it? Yeah, I did. Do you think I knew exactly what my co-pilot was going to say? Yeah, I did.
You were saying it right along with him as he was saying it.
Yes. But are we going to skip it because I know it? No, we're not going to skip it. We're going to do it. And by the way, as a captain, as the leader, you set the tone. When you say it's okay to skip things, what message did you just send to the person you're flying with?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe in discipline. I'm better than the other guys. We can do it my way. Not a good message in aviation. Again, very few and far between. Extremely few and far between. Guys that are at the level, that level of professionalism, practice it on purpose. And frankly, you'd stand out like a sore thumb, and somebody might ask you, what are you doing? You didn't call for this, or you didn't call for that, or, well, are you okay? What's the problem here? You would stand out. So.
Gotcha. So at this point, we've started, and we're talking in terms of what's happened at Midway. We have a FlexJet and a Southwest. And Southwest is just on a routine arrival, a 737 with plane full of people. And FlexJet is probably on a routine departure. He's going through this checklist. He's done hundreds of times or whatever. But what we ended up with is both of them trying to use the same runway at the same time, which does not work. It is not allowed, and it does not work. So I want to kind of bring us to talking about what's happening on the ground there a little bit. That kind of leads us into where we found ourselves yesterday. So I'm going to share a diagram of the airport here. And you and I were talking about this a little bit. Actually, all three of us have talked about this off and on since yesterday. But Kevin, do you mind walking us through what we see here just a little bit? We've got gray lines, we've got black lines with dots, we've got little black squares everywhere. What's happening?
You're confusing me. Wait. Stop with the squares and the dots.
Please
Very
stop.
confusing.
Oh man! But to someone who's never seen something like this before, what's happening here? What are we looking at?
So, just to back up a step or two. In my previous job, we'd be sitting there waiting to go. You see that all the time. You're getting on board the airplane, right? If you look as you're getting on board, if you look to the cockpit, those guys are sitting there, right?
Yeah.
The closer you get to the departure time, the closer you get to they've already done everything. They're just waiting. There's no rush.
Get in and sit down. We gotta go.
Yeah. So, and most guys in that time between we've done the checklists, the plane's ready to go, and you actually close the door and go. There's a little downtime. That's where the crew gets together. Says, okay, today's going to be a left seat takeoff. We're going to use flap 7. We're departing off runway 31 center. You would brief what you're going to do. And in this case, you would probably typically, you would brief the taxiway. So these guys, I think, where if you look at your chart and you look to the left, you'll see vertically, you see some black buildings.
Yep.
Over there, I think the second one from the bottom is Signature Aviation. It's an FBO, fixed-based operator. That's where guys get gas. That's where you're going to meet your passengers and all of that. I don't know. I don't know the habit pattern. Again, I've only been back in general aviation for a couple of years. Everything I just told you requires the two guys to be together, right? Briefing your departure, briefing your emergency procedures, briefing, what we're going to do. Looks like we're departing the XYZ departure today up to 5,000 feet. Initial turn is a left turn to 270. Whatever, you're going to brief, okay?
Yeah.
In the world of charter, oftentimes one guy is in the FBO waiting for the passengers. He's been waiting there the whole time once his part of the pre-flight was done.
So they're not having the chat of here's what we're going to do.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe some guys can get the impression that they have to, hey, the passengers are here. They paid a lot of money. Let's go.
Mm.
Versus taking the extra 45 to 60 seconds when that guy does show up. If you haven't done that briefing yet, to go, hey, let's just talk about, the taxi out, what we should expect, and the departure and all that. It takes about 60 seconds, maybe.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think time collapses on some guys. Maybe they're behind already. The passengers are late. They want to help keep them on schedule. And they're in the lobby waiting, and they walk the passengers out, and there's a let's go attitude. Yeah. I don't believe in that. And but that's a possibility that can happen. And the other thing is, in professional aviation, it's called expectation bias. Okay. Do you know what I mean by that?
I think I have a general idea. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I know where you're headed.
I've been here 20 times. I know what they're going to give me as a clearance. I have an expectation of that, and I'm familiar. Therefore, I don't need to brief myself or you, kind of approach to the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Expectation bias is a known industry problem. We can have too much familiarity with what we're doing, have an expectation, and then when I'm given an instruction contrary to that, I don't hear it. I don't comprehend it because of my expectation. So that's always a possibility. That could have been a possibility yesterday. Don't know.
Right.
You'll never know that
that's
until
speculation.
You debrief. Yeah. So coming out of, I'm assuming they came out of Signature off to the left.
Yep.
They were told to make a left turn onto runway 4 left. So you and I were talking about this earlier. I don't know if they joined 4 left off of taxiway Juliet or joined off of taxiway Foxtrot. But with that said, there's not much distance. Once you've joined 4 left, there isn't much distance from that to runway 31 left.
From either point.
Either point, you're darn close to 31 left, which is a skinny runway. And guess what skinny runways look like?
Taxiways.
Thank you. So, depending on one's familiarity or lack of familiarity, you can make different mistakes for different reasons and get to the same bad spot. So, joining 4 left, being told to cross 31 left, hold short 31 center. If they absolutely understood that clearance, I'm going to say that the guy taxiing, most like the pilot in command, the left seater, I'm going to say that he did not realize when he crossed 31 left that was 31 left. And darned if 31 center doesn't look like a runway. It's big and fat. And he kept going, thinking that was 31 left. I was cleared to cross 31 left, and then I'll find another runway, 31 center. For some reason, he crossed into 31 center. And again, SA, right? Situational awareness. I have no doubt that if he understood that 31 center was the departing runway, if he was told to hold short of 31 center, I can't imagine he did that on purpose.
Right.
Something went wrong.
Hey, Kevin, let me ask you this question because, we've all listened to the playback of the tower audio. And as someone that's involved both at Midway and also up at Anchorage Lake Hood, the hold short points. When you're coming off of a taxiway to a runway, there is a very definitive graphic that's painted on the tarmac.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that is not the case when, for instance, he was on 4 left, taxied past, 3-1 left, and before he got to 3-1 center, there was not like a hold short line painted across that runway.
No, there are not left to right markings on a runway. The only runway markings you see are the touchdown zone markers. That's at the beginning of a runway, and you see the center line, dashed line. You're right. There are no left to rights. Nothing. And what you're speaking about is the solid line, and then on the other side, a dashed line. Or if you're coming from the other side, a dashed line followed by a solid line telling you either you need to hold short of this until cleared, or you're cleared to go past it. Okay. And those lines are not. That's a great point. I hadn't thought of that, Bruce. That's a great point.
I'm just thinking from the standpoint of a pilot like yourself who routinely is flying in and out of airports, and you become accustomed to the paint that's used to denote some of those things. It would be like, Flyboy and I were talking earlier, the average motorist sees a stop sign. They know they're supposed to come to a complete stop. But do they? If most of us are honest, we would say, nah, it's a rolling stop. And sometimes some of us may even have proof of that from our local law enforcement agency.
Which is very nice of them to point it out.
It is. And yet, local law enforcement does not have the oversight to the same extent that the controllers do when they're looking out over the airfield. And as we almost saw yesterday, it could have had devastating circumstances.
Yeah, no, you know what, Stone, you brought up a great point that I hadn't even seen yet. You're right. Those markers are not there. So and again, the close proximity of either Juliet or Foxtrot, when you join 4 left, you're crossing 3-1 left so quickly. And again, maybe your head's down. That's another challenge. One of the pilots, if you're going to be disciplined all the time, right? One guy goes, hey, I'm heads down. That lets the other guy know I got no help anymore. I got no backup.
I'm watching everything.
My buddy is heads down in the box reprogramming something, or he's in a checklist, or something fell and he needs to get to it so it doesn't get in underneath the pedals. I don't know. But if he goes, hey, I'm heads down for a moment, that tells me he's not looking. I'm the only one looking. Okay. Yeah. So maybe they were both heads down. I don't know. Something happened, but that's a great point that you bring up. There were no markers. If you're on a runway like 4 left, there's nothing telling you you're crossing 3-1 left.
Yeah.
And as I was telling my buddy Mike earlier today, we were having coffee, and rarely do you go to an airport and do they ask you to hold short of the landing runway because they're going to have you cross and then taxi to it from the other side. That's pretty rare, to be honest with you. For obvious reasons. You don't want to keep potentially conflicting traffic, in that way. With that said, if a guy's on one side of the runway and he's got to get to the other side because that's where his terminal is, or that's where his FBO is, you got to cross active runways. But it isn't as typical as being asked to cross an inactive runway. That's very common, to cross inactive runways. With that said, most of us have learned when we cross runways, active or not, we turn all of our lights on, and we look left and we look right. We call it clear left, clear right, or clear. We're both looking. I don't see anybody. We're clear.
Yeah.
You're doing stuff like that. And so, like we talked about earlier, building habits. A lot of the habits we build aren't for today. They're not for tomorrow. They're for that time, 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, when something goes to happen and you built a defense already. If you're hoping to think of the right thing to think and say at the right moment, like checking a runway, even if it's one runway, we're approaching runway 13, okay? One of the things as professionals, what you should be doing is when you're cleared for takeoff, runway 13 confirmed, okay? When you turn onto the runway, the other guy, usually your procedure would be, depending on the company, but procedure would be you're checking your heading on your compass, on the situational, they call it an HSI, horizontal situation indicator. There's a compass rose on top. Make sure that aligns with the runway. If I'm on runway 13, I should see a heading of approximately 130 degrees, 129 degrees, 131. That's a confirmation. Okay,
that's where the runways get their number from. For anyone who's watching and doesn't know.
Exactly. Yeah, the magnetic. Yes. So, but a buddy of mine said he was talking to some guy. He goes, "Well, why would I do that?" Well, I get it. There's only one piece of pavement, and maybe it's not important today, but there are plenty of accidents that have happened over the years when you get 2 runways intersecting kind of like this. Well,
they're just close enough.
They're just close enough. And again, you build habits for that day, not necessarily today, but you practice it each time. Discipline cockpit, checklist discipline. That's how you save the day. So these guys, obviously the controller at some point, I can't tell when I hear the audio, I don't know that it's synced to the video. I don't think it is. So we don't know when the controller finally said to tell him. He told him to stop, right? I mean, wow. How do you not just stop? I don't know what happened there. I don't know when he was told. And again, it's quite possible to be distracted by normal duties and maybe miss the radio call. Okay? You didn't hear him call you. You thought he was talking to somebody else, and he was talking to you. That's not uncommon, that a controller calls a jet, and then a controller has to call back. That can happen. Maybe that happened. Maybe they didn't hear the stop call.
Right.
But boy, that controller was pretty blatant. He jumped on it. And you and I were talking about this yesterday. Somebody saying, where are the controllers in this? Man, the controllers did everything they could. They gave him the proper clearance. They told the guy as they saw him enter the run to stop entering the runway. What can you do? And by the way, and we touched on this as well, the 400 to 500 administrative type people that may have been let go from the FAA have nothing to do with anything a pilot will see. Okay? It has nothing to do with the controllers or lack of controllers, quality of controllers. It has nothing to do with controllers or anything happening at an airport at any given time. That whole political discussion has nothing to do with this.
Right.
That's right.
The other point too I would just make is that I did find it interesting that flex jet was sent down on 4 left, because typically when aircraft depart signature, they run them up the Whiskey taxiway to November, and then November around to the top there of where the departure end would be for 22 left or 22 right. So I just thought that was kind of interesting yesterday, because honestly, as many times as what I've been on that camera, I don't recall many instances where there was a plane crossing there. And if they're coming from Atlantic, then they typically run them up taxiway.
Was that Yankee?
Yeah, Yankee.
Boy, you make a great point. Wrap it around Whiskey, cross 13 center, 31 center at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And again, Stone, you caught it. there's nothing there designating for the crew when they're on 4 left. There's nothing designating 3-1 left. Nothing designating 3-1 center. I will say this: my 4Flight. We have an app on our iPads. They give us an app. It's called 4Flight. There may be others out there. 4Flight was purchased by Boeing several years ago. It's a great app. And to be honest with you, a voice comes up when I'm approaching a runway, and it tells me I'm approaching runway 3-1 left.
I hope it doesn't sound like Siri.
Yeah, it is. Is it annoying? Yeah, it's annoying because the controller might be trying to talk to me. The guy I'm flying with might be trying to talk to me, and I've got this voice going, you're now approaching 3-1 left or something like that. But you know what? Here's a great example of why something like that is like,
it's a good tool in the right
a good tool. And again, this is not ATC's fault. This is not the FAA's fault. But I think we're pointing out something where, as a matter of course, unless there's no way to take whiskey and go around the other side at the end, it's probably the best course of action unless whiskey's closed or the taxiways at that end are closed. It's probably the safest approach. And I don't know that it's saving much time taking 4 left. In other words, again, are we talking 30 seconds, 60 seconds? Efficiency is important in aviation, but maybe that would be and I'm not criticizing the FAA at all. They did a phenomenal job. They did their job. The crew, the FlexJet crew, let everybody down. And when I say that, most pilots that are honest will say there's those that have and those that will. In other words, do not think to yourself, oh, that's not me. I'm too good. I would never do that. Nobody I know with the humility and the skills would ever say that, because those guys are probably, those FlexJet guys probably have a ton of experience and are probably very good pilots. But even the best.
Question for you, and then we've got a couple of questions from chatters here that I would like to throw your way. Approximately, just a round number guess here. How many hours does it take of training to get to the point where you can fly a jet like the FlexJet that this was centering around yesterday?
Well, if you ask a military pilot, they'll tell you about 300 hours to go from no time to Mach 2. So what am I saying? What's your training methods? Yep. What is your screening method for the pilot? Now, the military screens a certain way and finds that guy who can absorb all of this information very quickly. Yeah. Does it mean he'll be better than the guy who absorbed it more slowly? No. Just means he was able to get through this shortened program where there's a lot of information. So can you fly a jet with 300 hours? Sure, if you're that kind of guy. But most of us in general aviation get the private. A lot of guys will do commercial multi-instrument rating all together. It's very modular and it saves money that way, and it builds on itself. So those 3 together are very good. Then you go out, ultimately, when you get the time, you can get an ATP. I think the minimum under certain programs is 1,000 hours. Things changed after that Colgan crash several years ago. And it's been a long time since I got my ATP back in the 80s. But
what does ATP stand for?
Airline Transport Pilot. So that's the highest rating. You got private. If you're going to break it down, you go private, commercial, ATP.
Yep.
Okay.
And ATP are the guys that we see flying any kind of jet, whether passenger or transport. They're transporting goods.
If you're the pilot in command, you have an ATP.
Yeah.
If you're flying a jet.
Yep.
I shouldn't say that. Because for all I know, under Part 91, if I owned my own jet, I might be able to do it without an ATP. But yeah, if you're doing it for hire, yeah. Yep. But yeah, so most guys, depending on what you've been exposed to, like my background was, I went from flying single engine airplanes to, when I had about 750 hours, I got to the right seat of an MU-2. The Mitsubishi MU-2 is a twin engine turboprop. Kind of cool looking, I think. It's got a high wing, tip tanks. They don't make them anymore, of course, but So I was brought in as a right seater in the Mitsubishi, a fast twin engine turboprop. Frankly, the only thing they allowed me to do initially was bring the gear up and do the radios. And then when they felt it was the time was right and there was nobody else on board, this is out on the West Coast. The airport I was flying in and out of was San Carlos Airport, right near San Francisco International. We used to go pick up medical teams out of SFO. So when we had nobody on board, we were hopping from San Carlos to SFO. When the time was right, captain gave me a chance to fly at SFO. Why? The runway's 10, 12,000 feet long. It's hard to screw that up. And so now you're learning technique on the big runway. Then let me land on shorter and shorter runways and, that sort of thing. So everybody has their own background and experience. These days, small jets, there's such a plethora of small jets. I can't believe it. It's nothing like it was 30 years ago. They're everywhere. Yeah. So everybody's going to flight safety or a school like flight safety, getting professional training, learning how to fly correctly. Then you get to a place like Flex Jets that has great pilots, highly professional pilots, and those guys are going to teach you techniques. They're going to teach you professionalism. So you kind of learn it that way now. But to get to the right seat of a jet, if you've got, 700 to 1,000 hours, why can't you be in the right seat of a jet? Under the supervision of a highly qualified PIC.
Experienced. Yeah.
But again,
that's helpful. Kind of gives a perspective of some of that training that guys have. It's not like they just got up and went in flying a jet today.
By the way, I would say you're probably not getting into the right seat of a small jet till you have at least, most likely, 1,000 hours. Typically, I'm not saying you can't get in with 700 or 800, but But again, you got the right team. You need to be able to read a checklist. So, okay, one of the qualifications is, can you read?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Jim Smith can read. So he's got one of the, you got enough time in an aircraft. I flew with a guy who had about 1,800 hours total time, but only a few hours in a jet. And he had some turboprop time. But he could keep up with jet speeds. In other words, he knew where we were, when we were there. He saw ahead, SA, right? Situational awareness. Yeah. Where are we going to be? He knew how to communicate on the radio. He knew what they were saying, when they were saying it, why they were going to say it. He was ahead of all that stuff. He was keeping up with jet speeds with minimal time in jets, but he had enough time in a King Air and enough time in singles. He was exposed to enough of all of it. He was able to keep up very well. I was impressed by him.
Good. Okay. That's helpful. Let me ask a couple of questions from folks in chat here. And then I'd love to touch on a conversation that we had earlier about the Southwest jet. So Tom is asking, did the smaller jet have a co-pilot or was it a single pilot? I apologize if this has been addressed. We don't know definitively, but based on your experience, Kevin.
So looking at it, it's hard for me to identify it. I couldn't tell if it was it kind of had the lines of a Phenom, and the Phenom 100 and 300 are single pilot rated. But Stone, do you know? I
think it was a Challenger 350.
I was going to tell you. Otherwise, it looked to me like a Challenger 300 series, which is a very nice jet. Now, you and I call that a small jet. It is not a small jet in general aviation. It is a mid-sized jet. It is a very expensive jet. It is a very nice jet. So it's going to require two.
Okay. Two
Excuse me. Cessna made a handful of single pilot jets. The Phenom 100 and 300 are certified to be single pilot. But let me explain something. You know who runs aviation? The insurance companies. They're going to tell you, they don't care that Cessna made a single pilot jet. They're like, no, we don't care. You need two pilots. Now, if you're your own guy, you're a wealthy person, you own your own airplane, and you want to pay a premium, I've seen that happen. Yes, there are single pilot aircraft out there that most people fly two-man aircraft, but there are some, but the insurance companies run the show.
They're making sure.
Well,
which is
they're the ones who are going to pay.
Yeah, exactly. So
By the way,
Baz is asking.
they're the final arbiters of, are you qualified to fly the airplane? They're the ones that would say, they might say, you know what, we like Stone, but he doesn't have enough time yet.
Yeah.
Okay, they're the ones that determine the minimum time they want to see in a pilot as well.
Gotcha. So Baz is asking, can controllers work several airports or do they stick with one? Lone Ranger is putting a lot of information here in chat in response to this, but do you want to touch on this at all?
Now, you just controllers do. Now, I'm not saying they don't maybe do a TDY thing, temporary duty. I have no idea if they do that. But if you're a controller in Austin, or you're a controller at John Thune Airport outside of Nashville, that's your airport.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe Gunstar One can weigh in on that as well in the chat because he is a former controller.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, I thought there was one other one here. Well,
Violet
I looked
just
for it.
asked a
Maybe.
good one.
Oh. Okay. Violet, have you ever misheard ATC to the extent where the readback was wrong? The pilot sounded confused. Won't speculate, but have you experienced something similar?
I have. I mean, it's not uncommon.
This is a
not
non-incriminating answer.
Yeah. Well, wait a second. Didn't I tell you I'm a professional pilot? I don't make mistakes. Wait a second. Have I flown? Maybe I've flown with Violet. Maybe she's one of my former co-pilots.
She's testing you.
Yes. Wait a second. I know you. So it is not uncommon typically to misunderstand and just go, say again. Or was that for, UPS 123, and they'll come back and say it, or I'll get half of it and say, I got up to, blah, blah, blah. And the Gunter intersection, say after that, but I don't recall. I don't think I've ever been involved with a situation where they told me climb maintain flight level 350. And I thought they said 330. Okay. With that said, if I thought they said 330, I'd be calling back going, Roger, climb maintain 330. Negative. Climb maintain flight level 350. Okay. They would correct you because when you read back, they correct you if you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to touch on that a little more? What do you mean by read back? What's that?
The term read back is read back, like, you'll always hear on an ATIS, and maybe you'll see this on Midway. And Stone, you've done this enough, but and Garrett, maybe you've seen this before. It'll say read back all hold short instructions. You ever seen that in the ATIS?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they want you when they tell you citation 123 Alpha Juliet, hold short runway 31 left. They want me to say Roger, hold short 31 left. They don't want me to say Roger, I got it. Roger,
they want to make sure you know.
They want to make sure. So every time you spit back whatever was told to you, that's called read back.
Yep. And it happens every time you talk to ATC, you repeat back.
Oh, yeah.
What they've just told to you. You say it right back.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yep. I experienced that too. I'm just asking for those who don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me just weigh in on this for a second, because not only do I spend a fair amount of time at Midway, but also up in Alaska, and specifically with the Lake Hood airspace, which I know Kevin has familiarity with. But in all the tower communications that I've listened to for the last few years, I can say without a doubt I have never heard an unprofessional comment from any controller in his communications with the pilots. These guys and women have been the utmost professionals in their conversation. You can sometimes tell, if you're familiar with hearing some of the voices in the different towers, when a controller is maybe getting a little bit testy with a certain pilot, And 99% of that time, it's because the pilot doesn't understand the airspace. They don't have the familiarity with it. They don't understand the ingress and egress routes that some of these airspaces have, which can be just a sliver of space. But more often than not, it's miscommunication coming from the cockpit, and sometimes it's not that the pilot is the problem, it's their microphone. A lot of times that's been problematic, where a tower has told them, look, when you get back down on the lake or on the runway, you need to try a different microphone, because we're not picking you up 5x5, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point.
Kevin, when we were talking about doing this very thing yesterday, we were talking about the Southwest jet coming in. He's on approach. He's nearly touchdown and done with his flight. And he sees a plane on the runway, and he aborts his landing and says, going around. Can you describe a little bit? You described this last night. What's going on in the airplane, in the cockpit? What's going on with the airplane itself as it's landing? It was really impressive to hear what are the steps that's happening, and the fact that this still ended up a safe incident. Like, nobody got hurt, no one died, nothing bad like that happened, and yet there are other things, other factors happening for a pilot that make that even more impressive, in my opinion. It's not a huge bearing, but I thought it was interesting. So I'd like to hear or share that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So when you're at the 5 mile point, which is a general final, what's called the final approach fix, a generic final approach fix is 5 miles out, and you're roughly 1,500 feet above the ground. Okay. So when you see an aircraft coming in, all right, everybody's doing what's called a 3-to-1. It's a 3-to-1 glide path. For every mile away from the airport, you want to be 300 feet. So 3-to-1. It's just a way of synthesizing something that's understood. Okay. Yeah. 300 feet to every mile, 3-to-1. You're coming in. Every airplane flies roughly 5 times their ground speed. That'll give you a 3-to-1 descent rate. Okay. So if my ground speed is 100, what should my descent rate be? 100 times 5, 500 feet a minute. When I flew the 747, in a no-wind situation, we were doing 165. So I had to do a little over 850 feet a minute to hold a 3-to-1. By the way, if I lost all my instruments, but I still had a vertical speed indicator, and it says I'm doing 850 feet a minute, am I going to hit the touchdown zone? You bet I am. Do I need a localizer and a glide slope, which are those instruments telling us we're perfectly going down the runway and on a perfect glide slope? I don't need it. I don't need the glide slope indicator if I'm doing my 5-to-1. These are rough things, but they're very, very accurate. So as you're coming in, you want to make sure you're stable. You're on your glide slope. Everybody in the professional world, Southwest, you're flying whatever approach you can. Their most accurate approach available. I think 3-1 Center most likely has an ILS. If it does it, Stone? It does? Okay. So if it has an ILS, or even what's called an LPV approach, which mimics an ILS, they're both considered precision approaches for lateral and vertical guidance, precision approaches. So they're probably backing everything up with that. So as you're coming in, you're making sure you're on your vertical glide path. There's the runway. It doesn't take much to figure out if you're on a lateral, path. The runway's in front of you. You're flying your 3-to-1. You're coming in. You've already been cleared to land, most likely. One of the call outs I try to make, it's not an official call, but I try to go, runway looks clear to me. Now, I don't say the runway's clear. Why? I don't want to stick something in my co-pilot's head, make it a declaration as if they don't have to confirm it. I say, hey, the runway looks clear to me, which implies.
Are you seeing anything else?
There you go. What do you see, right?
Yeah.
There's kind of intuitive implication there.
Yeah.
But I do try to say, runway looks clear to me. One thing I don't know about yesterday, were they told that flex jet was holding short? Southwest, what was it, 2054? Was that the flight number?
I think so.
Something like that. So was Southwest told, be advised, FlexJet holding short of 3-1 center at Delta or at whatever, at 4 left. Okay.
4 left in this case, yeah.
Yeah. So were they told that? I don't know. It's not, I don't know that it's required, but oftentimes controllers, and I think it's to put aside any fears for the pilot, what's that guy doing? Why is that guy next to the runway? Okay. When I see somebody near a runway, I want to know why when I'm landing. I could assume
halfway down the runway.
Yeah, I could assume they're holding short. I could assume they were told to hold short, but are they? Okay. Right. And so oftentimes the controllers say, there's a Canadair Challenger holding short, runway 31 left. Got it. And whoever you're flying with, okay, I see him. And he's sitting there for a while. So it's obvious they know to hold short. This particular situation, when you're coming in on a short runway, you're stabilized, your power set, you're on speed, you're on your vertical path, you're 3-1, you're making small adjustments if you're hand flying to make sure you're going to hit that touchdown zone, that spot. You don't want to float. By the way, it's very easy if you're not paying attention to start going a little high on final. That's what makes the difference between a professional and somebody who's sloppy. Okay, somebody knows how to stay on target. And on a shorter runway, you want to stay on target even more so. You got 12,000 feet? Okay, I went a little high, landed a little long. It's 12,000 feet. These guys were doing a great job. They're right on target. And you can see from the video that, in my opinion, they were extremely close to that jet. In other words, you and I talked yesterday, as they're coming down to touchdown in the touchdown zone, which is anywhere from, say, 1,500 to no more than 3,000 feet. And on a short runway, frankly, it's not 3,000 feet. They've got to be at the 1,500 to 2,000 foot point on a shorter runway. And they were that close to that Challenger. Oh, my gosh. It wasn't like this is a 12,000 foot runway. They're going to touch down at 2,000 feet. And there's an aircraft, impeding the runway at 9,000 feet or 10,000 feet way down there. These guys were way too close. And the Southwest jet, those guys are heroes. My opinion, they're heroes. So what we talked about yesterday was they were so close to the ground, right? You could see the wheels are not very far from touching. Here's what's going to happen when you touch down. A, you're going to start decelerating.
Yep.
And B, immediately there's a lever. The speed, people see the spoilers come up all the time. Okay. And on landing, those spoilers, all spoiler panels come up. Okay.
And they're on top of the wing.
What's that now?
They're on top of the wing, correct?
Yes. And the reason is you want air smoothly flowing over your wing to create lift. You're on the ground. You want to destroy that lift. What's the quickest way? Throw those panels up. So on airliners, there's an auto function. So you put the lever, which you can move manually, you put it in auto so that at wheel spin up, boom, those spoilers pop up quickly. Now there's no more lift being created or very little, and the weight is now on the wheels, and now the brakes are more effective for stopping. Okay.
That's typically what you're doing when you're landing. Right. You're trying to stop.
And talk about expectation bias, right? These guys were expecting to land. Expectation bias. The runway's clear. Expectation bias. Touchdown, roll out. Let's go to the terminal. We're done for the day or whatever.
Yeah.
They are this close to touching down. Those spoilers popping up. Uh-oh. If you want to go around now, there's 3 things you're going to do. You're going to pull back. You're going to add power, max thrust.
Yep.
And you want those spoilers to be stowed. You've only got 2 hands.
Right.
I think intuitively anybody, especially how close those aircraft were, seeing a windshield full of airplane crossing left to right, whoever was flying would have pulled back, went full power, and I don't know if they would have had enough power in that moment to overcome the spoilers still being deployed. I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. Yeah. They were awfully close. I really don't.
Yeah.
By the way, the plane can overcome those spoilers. Those engines are powerful. I'm not saying you wouldn't fly. I'm just saying I don't know how quickly the whole response of all of that would have been, given how close they were, had they touched down and then tried a go-around maneuver at that point.
Is there a scenario in which, so you're the pilot in command, you're flying, you're the one who's full power pulling back. Does your co-pilot reach down and pull up those spoilers manually, or because you're the pilot in command, that's your role? How does that work in the cockpit? In an emergency situation like this, obviously, routine flight is.
Well, again, they're going to deploy automatically, unless now, do they have to? No. Let's say there's something wrong with the auto function. You can, according to the maintenance list, you can defer those spoilers. In other words, you can use the manual function.
Okay. And
you would brief that. Hey, on touchdown, make sure I pull. Now, remember, the lever is going to be in the center panel. The lever is on the captain's side, which doesn't mean when the co-pilot's flying, they can't reach over and deploy them manually on a landing. And again, that would be between
reaching into the co-pilot.
Yeah, he'd just be reaching over past the throttles to pull the lever. That's something that might be, depending on the airline, it might be procedural how that's done, or it might be something discussed between the two pilots. Hey, I'll tell you what, the captain might go, you know what, I'll get the spoiler lever for you. Or the captain might say, hey, on landing, do you want to reach over and get that yourself? Or, and maybe if it's a short runway, the captain goes, let me do it. It'll get done faster. If it's a really long runway, how do you want to do it? So again, it might be procedural, written down how you do it at a particular airline, or it might be something discussed between the crew. There would be a performance difference. Why? Auto spoiler is going to be faster than me reaching and pulling the manual lever. It just is. Human factors. So there would be a different performance. The performance would require, I need a longer runway. When I say longer runway, the runway might only need to be 4,000 feet long, and I'm landing on 8,000 feet. Okay. So my performance numbers might tell me, today instead of 4,000 feet, you need 4,132. Okay. I'm just telling you that we do take into account, and performance takes into account, the difference between an automated system and a manual system. And by the way, is it safe? Yeah, either way is safe. Auto's just a little better.
Faster.
Yeah, but you can't go without auto spoilers. You can just do them manually.
Well, and you touched on that earlier with your glide slope scenario being that electronic system being out. You have a gauge there that's still spinning and telling you what's your rate per minute that you're descending.
There are ways to back up what you're doing. Okay.
Exactly.
You can interpret your instruments with one or two that if they were missing. Now, by the way, that's just not going to happen in modern airplanes. Why?
Right.
Something happens to one of my instruments, there's a button on my side that transfers the information from the co-pilot side over to my side. Electronic stuff's really cool. The old mechanical stuff, you couldn't do that. But today, ever since 757s came out, if something happens to my display that's in front of me, I can choose to get my co-pilot's display. Problem solved. Do I have any more redundancy? Nope, I just used it. Do I have to make an emergency landing? No, unless there's something I can think of that is giving me the impression all of our instruments are somehow going to fail. I'd want to get on the ground sooner, but again, the redundancy is phenomenal these days. But with that said, I lost a particular instrument. Do I know how to fly manually? Do I know how to fly a visual approach with just one instrument? I knew my ground speed. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah,
most guys can. At this level.
Well, let me look here and see if there's any other questions. I know we're kind of coming to the end of the time that we had available to do this. Let's see, we got that answered.
Yeah, just for giggles, at some point here in the next few days, I'm going to take a look at the number of flights per day that Chicago Midway typically reports. I'm going to try to pull both commercial as well as biz jet general aviation. But I'm curious to look at is for the 1 square mile that
Yeah.
Chicago Midway occupies, the amount of sheer activity that takes place in that 1 square mile on average on a daily basis versus other airports that have, say, similar traffic numbers, and how many square miles do they occupy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just my own opinion. I think Midway is one of those hybrid airport. Again, hybrid, big jets, and small airplanes. It's an airport to be respected. As an aviator, you need to respect what you're getting yourself into. It's not like no big deal. I'm going into some small one runway airport somewhere, you know. And even that could be bad. I was going down to where are we going? Naples, or somewhere in Florida. And man, the I think it was the Palm Beach. Was the Palm Beach controller? No, Fort Myers controller. She was working like I'm like, wow. She was boom, boom, talking to this guy. You couldn't even squeeze in that you were there. Now, when you get handed off, you're supposed to check in, right?
Right.
Citation 123 Alpha Bravo with you at 5,000 feet. Heading assigned 030, something like that, right? Well, that's a lot of talking when somebody's that busy. So as a professional, I've just learned over the years, and if you guys know this, when you give a full call sign, you only have to do that the first time you connect. So if I'm 123 Alpha Bravo, when I call back, I only have to say 3 Alpha Bravo. Okay. With that said, does this controller know that I'm coming? Yeah, they know I'm coming. It's not like oh gosh, who are you? What are you doing?
Where'd you come from?
Yeah, especially with an approach controller. Well, this woman is running like at least 3 airports. She's running the approach stuff, vectoring guy for 3 different airports. She was working like a dog. I'm like, somebody help this lady out. She was doing a great job, but I mean, you could hear, huffing and puffing. She's running. Well, I know to check in with just my, you know what? I would just call out 3 Alpha Bravo, just to let her know I'm there. She doesn't get to me in a couple minutes. 3 Alpha Bravo. Otherwise, I would say Fort Myers approach, citation 123 Alpha Bravo at 5,000 feet, heading assigned 030. Again, that would be the formal, proper way to engage with the controller, something like that. But when they're that busy, just every so often,
brief.
So I just let 3 Alpha Bravo. I know she knows who I am. I know she was expecting me, and I'm just trying to make sure she knows I'm out there expecting her to get to me. And I would wait every minute or two and just 3 Alpha Bravo. It took me like 3 times, and she got to us. She did a great job. She did a phenomenal job. That was busy.
Hey, Kevin, just one quick question with what you were just talking about. By using 3 Alpha Bravo, say you've taken off from Naples and you're flying to Chicago Midway, and often I hear the pilots, especially the general aviation pilots, talking about flight following, and I understand that's supposed to help expedite the process, and so they don't have to keep announcing themselves every time. Though I think when they transfer from one airspace into the next, is that something that you're familiar with?
Flight following is usually a term used internally. In other words, I have flight following with the dispatch function, and they're not formal dispatchers at small companies like the one I fly for. A formal dispatcher does fuel, flight planning, routing, weather, all kinds of stuff. But these people are tracking me in charter operations, Part 135 of the FARs, Federal Aviation Regulations. You're required to have some sort of following, and so there are people at the company I work for and the one I previously worked for that do this flight following. They know where we are.
Okay.
That's how I understand the term flight following. In the air, now there's no skipping anything. Next controller, I could be in say Jacksonville Center, I could be in 5 different sectors, and each one I got to check in. When he hands me off, I got to check in as to who I am. And again, if he's super, super busy, I will ultimately just throw out the last 3 characters of my call sign because I know he's expecting me. Otherwise, I do 99.9% of the time, you do the formal call out.
Gotcha.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's kind of related to a question that was answered by Gunstar. WD Violet asked, another question I've seen a lot asked is, can the pilots hear all the other pilots getting ATC instructions and reading them back so the Southwest pilot could hear the private jet pilot?
That's a great question. Yes, that's SA, situational awareness. When I was a young pilot flying that DC-8 as a co-pilot out of O'Hare, they're taking off out of 2 or 3 runways. They're landing on 2 or 3 other runways. There's a lot going on. It was not uncommon for the guy in front of us to be cleared for takeoff and for us to be told to taxi into position and hold. And as that guy's just rotating, UPS 123, clear for takeoff, runway 21, turn left, heading what? I mean, boom, boom, boom. You got to pay attention. Why is SA really, really important in that scenario? Does it really matter that I know what the other guy's doing? Well, if somebody was told to hold short of a runway, hey, there's somebody moving out there. He's supposed to be holding short for me. He's still moving. That sort of thing. But here's where it's really critical. And at Louisville International, where that's where I was based for UPS, because that's where the airline's based. You got runway 35 left and right.
Yep. So
if the guy on 35 left is told to turn left to a heading of 270, and the guy on 35 right is told to turn right to a heading of 030, great. What if the controller accidentally, UPS 123, upon departure, turn right, heading 030, clear for takeoff, 35 left. And then the other guy's cleared for departure, even if he was cleared straight out, you could have a collision, right? A midair. So SA is very important. That's one of the critical reasons everybody speaks one language in aviation. With that said, you go to some countries like going into China, when they talk to the Chinese airlines, they talked in what was it, Cantonese or Mandarin, which reduces my SA. I don't know what he just told that guy. I don't know what that guy thinks he just heard, what he may have repeated back. So yes, great question, Violet. You want to hear what the other guy's being told because you need it for your SA.
How does this response factor in then? Gunstar 1 said the Southwest was talking to the local controller. FlexJet was talking to the ground controller. They are different frequencies, as he says. But how does that factor in this specific scenario? Because what you're describing is everybody leaving or arriving, so they're talking to the tower, so to speak. And this guy's probably still in the tower, but he's managing the folks just moving around on taxiways and stuff. How's that different? How does that factor in?
So you see it every day, tower and ground working hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. The Southwest jet was talking to the tower. FlexJet was talking to the ground controller. Now, sometimes when it comes to crossing runways, you are handed off to the tower controller. That part I don't know in this scenario. But with regards to SA, that's oftentimes why the tower controller will say, be advised, FlexJet holding short, 3-1 center at 4 left. Just to give you an advisement, you see somebody near your runway, he knows to hold short. Now, I don't know if that was given to Southwest,
right,
and he was looking at that guy, wondering what's going on, or if that guy just surprised him, that I don't know. But when it comes to the radio communications, you're correct. In those small moments, one guy's on tower, the other guy's on ground.
I will say that at least on arrivals of the biz jets at Midway, it is not uncommon for the tower to tell them, say they're landing on 3-1 center, take the first available left turn, and then they've already asked them on approach, are you going to Atlantic or are you going to Signature? And at least they typically say, okay, once they're off the runway, stay with me to the FBO they're going to, versus the commercial guys, Southwest, Polaris, Delta, whoever at Midway, they're immediately, as soon as they're off the runway, handed off to ground control.
Yeah, and that's a technique controllers will use. The tower just goes, stay with me. It's a simple thing. They know you're making a left turn, you go to Signature or whatever. When you have more complicated taxi routes, usually they're going to hand you to the ground guy. That's a great point. That's a great point. And that's all part of professionalism, part of the latitude that all the players have. And we just all try to listen up, pay attention. And in this case, like I said, I think the FAA did a phenomenal job. The tower and ground, phenomenal job. And the Southwest guys did just a great job. I mean, heroes, they did a beautiful, smooth, hey, we're going around. And I used to brief with my guys. I go, look, go arounds, we don't do them very often. We typically only do them in training events. I go, so let's just do it half speed. We're not in a hurry. It's just a go around. We're not going to hit a mountain. We're just going to execute a different procedure. So it's like, all right, let's go around thrust, flaps 15, positive rate, gear up. Okay, he just gave us a heading. Let's fly heading. Let's fly up to 3,000. And just take your time, relax. It's just a go around. And I thought they did a fantastic job. I'm very proud. As a professional, I'm proud of what they did. So,
yeah. Anything else you'd add as we wrap up here?
Nah, I had a good time.
Very good. I did too. It was a lot of fun. Just the three of us chatting, but also involving all of our chatters here and seeing their messages and getting to answer a few questions.
Yeah. So. And by the way, if not for Mike Apke at ProAuto, right across the street where the camera's located, we don't have this.
That's right.
So kudos to him. Thank you, Mike.
To ProAuto.
Thank you very much. He's a hero too.
That's it. Yes. Well, Kevin, hopefully we can do this again with you sometime.
Yeah.
Probably a different topic, different discussion point. Hopefully a different discussion point. But we'd love to pick your brain some more.
Well, and you and I talked about this before. Obviously, there's guys that are really great experts in certain areas of safety, crew awareness of things, and I'll bring them into our discussion as well. It'll be fun to talk to them, pick their brain on what's going on. So,
absolutely, it'd be good.
Yeah. Well, enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Yes, same here.
Thank you all.
Thank you both as well.